process.
All right, I think we're ready to go.
Okay.
Fantastic. Dany Green, it is a delight to sit down and talk with you about your work. We're sitting here at the Art of Noize in the beautiful Petworth neighborhood. So we want to thank everybody for coming out and the folks who are tuning in on Instagram Live. Let's have some fun talking about who you are as an artist, your process, and this wonderful exhibit that we're sitting in, Family Portrait. So we're here in Petworth in DC, but you are originally from the Philadelphia area. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up in Philadelphia and some of the early inspiration?
Totally. I actually was born in Tampa, Florida, and then we moved to New Mexico where my sister was born. So I started my adventure in Philly at age around 7. And from that point on, I was just making art, casually. I was doing it for fun. And so I never really saw myself as an artist. But then, I found Isaiah Zagar's Magic Gardens. At age, I was like 16 years old, I came and visited, and it's just like a courtyard and a house full of glass and found objects and, broken bottles and tires. And it's just very beautiful, like glittering in the sun. And I wanted to make a mosaic. I saw it and was like, I'm just gonna figure it out. And I made my first mosaic actually in high school for a graduation project. And it was actually a really big one, like 4 feet wide for the wall. And I kept making them, as a hobby. So I would say everything started in Philly.
What about Philadelphia as a city really resonates with you? If you were to say, I carry Philly with me everywhere I go, what are some of those elements that really give you joy about that city?
I think Philly is definitely more of a blue-collar city. So I feel like there's a lot of value in working with your hands and just utilizing found objects. And I think that something like Magic Gardens could only really exist in a city like that. And just using things that you found, things that maybe would be considered trash, but I call them trasher,
Trasher.
Basically,
So
treasure and trash.
Of the treasure and the trash, the trasher. Okay, we're
And
going to hashtag that.
I just think that the ability to kind of utilize what's around you, utilize all of your materials and things that you just find and kind of turn it into something more beautiful like art,
As you were describing your growth into art, I want to go back to that little piece about, you said you were 7 when you first began to love art, and then you also said, but I did it only casually. That sounds about right for a 7-year-old. But can you take us back to that moment when you were that little and enjoying art?
Right. Yeah, I guess I use the word casual in the fact that I never took any classes, and I would just kind of come up with ideas. Like one time I was like, I want to make the town, a fake town, just out of clay. So I'm like, Mom, we need to go to the dollar store because I need to get some Play-Doh. And just like spending hours doing that and making little Barbie houses. And I think, as a kid, you get kind of labels, right? You get labeled something. And I think my label was creative. And so I really took that on at an early age. I remember actually in elementary school, we were doing art and we were supposed to draw like, I think a bird in a pond. And I was the only person in the class, I guess, who did it from above. And I remember the teacher calling my mom in and telling her like, oh, she's very creative, she's an artist. And I think I really internalized that, And from that point on, I think I just would be like, I gotta make art, I gotta work with my hands. I'm an artist, I'm creative,
That young, you decided that you were creative, and that title resonated with you.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful that that was the title, that it was creative, that you really internalized. Did you have any idea what that meant to be creative?
I never really thought of it as more of like a profession. I think I just thought of it more of a personality trait, I remember I started in 3rd grade a different school, and I had 3 friends. We were all like new at the same time. And I remember like one is sporty and one is academic and I'm the creative. And I think that I don't know, you kind of like take the authority in that space. You're like, I'm the artist, you know, if we do creative things, I'm the leader in that space. So yeah, I think that I only start thinking of it more as a profession, something that you could do for a living, something that you do seriously and you practice, I would say a couple years ago.
How did your family take to you deciding that you were a creative? Did
Right.
they respond to that well, or they're like, no, you're just Dany?
I mean, I definitely think that both my parents saw me as, you know, a creative person, like, oh, she's artist, you know. I think they said it more as like, again, like a personality, not like she's going to become an artist, but just like she's the creative one. And they would always like to recruit me, you know, for various activities. I studied film actually in the college. And so, you know, oh, she can film it for us, you know, she can video it for us, you know, oh, she can do the design for us, you know. So I feel like they saw that as a bonus, I guess. Of like, oh,
That's a great segue to talk a little bit about your college days and how being creative showed up then. So tell us where you went to school and what those years were like in terms of your creative development.
yeah. So I went to American University in DC, and I studied film, and then I added on graphic design a little bit later. I think at the time I was just thinking about, what am I good at? What do I like? What am I interested in? And I remember actually recently looking at that list I made in high school of my like creative attributes and what I like. And the funny thing is, the only thing that like didn't fit, I think, with film and design and that kind of techie stuff was, oh, I really like to make mosaics. I really like to work with my hands.
Wait,
Sorry.
plot point. So you're studying film, you made this list
Right.
of all the things that you really enjoyed, and mosaics didn't make it on the list.
It didn't fit with the other things, you
So
know? So I was
somehow.
like, film makes sense, you know? And it only makes me laugh because I saw that recently. And I think I just said, oh, like art will be, you know, working with my hands, at least that kind of art will be more of a side thing, and this will be my main thing. And I still really love film and design, even though I'm doing art. That is still very much a part of my journey.
Wait, you made your passion your side boo, and you made your side boo your main gig. Why? What was your thinking in that choice?
It's so funny that you even use that analogy, because I used to use that analogy in my head. You know, I used to say,
See?
"Oh, design is my, you know, my married partner," you know, and then artist is kind of my side thing that I do secretly, you
Your love
know.
on the sneak.
And like I'm like, you know, this is consistent, and it's, you know, you can make a living, and that's kind of like the fun. Maybe I'll run away.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
and be fully engrossed in that. But
Why do people do that, do you think? Particularly creatives. Why make the choice to do something stable, reliable, instead of going all out, you know, all into the passion that you have?
right, I think I didn't grow up with parents that are, you know, artists or really creative, and so I feel like the idea of doing that wasn't something that I think crossed my mind. And I think a lot of artists have similar stories. If they didn't grow up in like a very arty household, they just kind of do what they know. Like, I feel like film was a career that I knew that was creative. Like, oh, okay, like you can be a filmmaker. I didn't even know about graphic designers, you know? So that was, again, something I kind of added on later. And then, you know, you go down that path and then you meet someone else who's actually doing art. They're doing it full time. And you're like, oh, that's something you can do? I didn't know. So I think a lot of artists do that just because they can't imagine it, right? We only think of like the Warhols. We don't really think of kind of the neighbor next door who's actually making a pretty okay living doing art full time. You know, they're not famous, they're not millionaires, but they're doing okay.
But Isaiah Zagar was in the back of your mind, though, since you
Right.
had seen his work when you were in high school and you started that mosaic work. So it sounds like that was an idea that was percolating,
Definitely.
but then didn't take off. So tell us a little bit about that moment when you said, wait, I actually am going to move the side chick to the front. Sorry, I made this commitment to film, but I don't actually love you. Now you have
Yeah.
to move the mosaic work to the forefront. How did that go?
Totally. actually think that this is part of that, like what I'm going to say is part of my mission, and the fact that I want people to understand that art can be different materials that maybe you've never even thought of. Like, I think part of it was the fact that I thought of art as like drawing and painting and more in these boxes. And I think that it can be a lot more than that. So I think the idea of being like a mosaic artist was something I've never really even heard of. I definitely came through mosaics through the back door, similar to Isaiah Zagar. Like, he just started putting together broken bottles and found objects. And, you know, the tradition of mosaic making is with tile, you know, and smalty and like more traditional mediums. So I basically am saying that to say that I fell into it, you know, by just like making it a lot, posting it on Instagram, and then getting a response from people, and just slowly building that up. And then people were like, is this for sale? You know, can I buy
said,
that?
Yes.
And I said, yes, it is. And they're like, how much? And then I'm like, uh-oh, let me...
Wait, what was the first price? What was the first price that you sold your work for?
So I was making 6x6s, so really small little pieces, because I just wanted to like get in the flow. And like, you know, as I said, I'm that person who makes like little side projects for fun. You know, I'm like,
watch out, side projects.
I know, right? They could be
project.
full time, and I
That's
accept that, you know. But I sold the 6x6 piece for $70.
Yes,
which I
great.
think was kind of that beginning, like, well, if I want to be considered serious, what would be like a serious price?
A serious price, y'all. Okay, a serious
And that
price.
felt like a big number,
But
a
that was
scary
back
number to
then
even say.
For 6 inches by 6 inches.
Right.
So anyone who was hoping for $70, we're here to break some hearts. And we're going to
Right.
pick up, we break things. We're going to pick up, you know, the idea of breaking things later. Great. So you moved into mosaic work through kind of organically. Had you been working full-time in film, or were you working full-time in another industry?
So I graduated in film and graphic design as my minor, and I was trying to find a job. That was kind of obviously a struggle when you're trying to get your first gig. And I kind of transitioned into graphic design at that point. I made a pivot. You know, that was pivot number one of like, I think I'm actually going to go down this route. I like this a lot more. So I got a graphic design job, and I'm doing the 9 to 5. I'm making the most money I've ever had. And I remember being like, you know, what do you do after work? And for the first time, I kind of invested in myself by buying a lot of glass. I bought stained glass for the first time, a whole bunch of it, and set about that 6x6 piece. What would you call it? Like a side project, or like a challenge?
Yeah.
That's what I would call it. So I was trying to do like the 6x6 piece challenge while I was doing my day job. And I thought it was just gonna be one of those projects that, you know, I do and then I throw it away. But I really do, I know it sounds kind of silly, but I really thank Instagram for it, because
Thank you, Instagram.
I just think it started connecting with people. People were responding to it. I was able to meet other mosaic artists and see their stuff. And I finally feel like, even though I came through the back door, I was kind of in the restaurant now. You know, another analogy.
Can't kick you out now.
I was fully in, and I was like, oh, so there's a lot of things going on, right? And yeah, so I was working full time up until, you know, really recently.
Yesterday. No, just
Yeah,
kidding. I don't know if it was yesterday.
That would be cool.
So when you
I'd be
put this on
surprised.
Instagram for the first time, you're putting yourself out there. Did you feel any trepidation just before you hit the post button to present your work for the first time without formal training? You're just like, hey, I'm just going to slide this in there. How
Right.
did you feel when you did that?
I think I had no intention of kind of blowing it up. I just didn't want to put a lot of my art pictures on my personal, because I thought that would be annoying. And I was a little scared. So I was like,
Okay.
I'll move them to this other account. You know, I only told my friends about it. I didn't even really promote it and say, follow me. I just was posting, and the only people who kind of knew about it were my close friends. And then I was just talking to like older people. A lot of the mosaic people are older. So I felt like that was kind of like a very safe space for me to post because old people are really nice online, actually. You know,
Shout out to the old people who are really nice online.
I'm just
Thanks,
saying,
guys.
if it was a different medium, you know, it might be a scarier space. But people were really supportive, and they gave me advice, and I was honestly very open. I posted progress pictures, and yeah, now I feel like it's a little more refined. But
this is a great time to actually shout out your IG handle so that people can follow you now. Your IG handle is?
I am Dany times art, so DANYXART.
Perfect. Let's talk about your process. Can we transition into talking about the process? I love this statement. It's very bold. You say, I break things and I put them back. Look at that face.
I mean, I tried to think of a statement that sums it all up. You know?
I break things and I put them back together. Let's talk about the literal interpretation of breaking things and putting them back together in terms of using the pieces of glass and your process. Take us into how all this magic happens.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I thought of that phrase because I think that what I really like to do is really like break things apart. Even when I'm doing film, you know what I mean? Like I'm taking a scene, a situation, a video, and then I'm chopping it up and editing it. Or I was doing graphic design, which I really think is digesting a lot of information and then putting it back out. And so I felt like Mosaics was just another version of that same thing. And so I'm literally taking sheets of stained glass, mirror, and breaking. I usually do an initial break. Boop,
With
like
a hammer?
With a hammer.
Do you put down like protective cloth or something? Or
It's-
like, how does that work?
It's a lot more boring, you know, the way it looks, because I literally just put it in a bag, like a plastic bag, so that it doesn't go everywhere, and then just smash it, you know.
Do you wear protective eyewear?
I do.
Okay, good. Just
I try
wondering.
to, because my mom would be very upset with me.
Got it.
But it's got to be fashionable. So I have these really nice glasses that are no prescription that I wear.
Okay. Are they on your IG page too? Can we see a picture of the glasses? On
Probably.
The IG
I'm
page?
probably
Okay.
wearing them in some kind of video. So I wear those, and then I usually cut up the pieces even further with my nippers. They're tile nippers.
It sounds like they do more than nip.
They do. I mean, they break, you know, they nip.
Yeah.
And so I actually use nippers that create more of a random jagged shape, which I really like. I want to keep a little bit of that organicness in the breaks. You know, I think of it as like a term called wabi-sabi.
A wabi-sabi.
Have you heard of it? It's like
Definitely haven't heard of it.
it's kind of the beauty of randomness, or beauty of just like things that happen, you know? And so I want it to look like it happened, but also you can see a little bit of my hand, the visual hand.
So it's a balance of intentionality, but also
Perfect.
the randomness. Okay, so
better
we
way to
have
say it.
this big bag of broken glass, and then what happens?
And then I usually separate it and then into like bigger pieces, smaller pieces. And then I sit there and I nip all the pieces. I usually start with mirror. A lot of my pieces have mirror in them.
Quick explanatory
yes.
comma about what mirror is. Like, how do you even spell that? What is mirror?
Oh, mirror, like, you know, like a mirror. Like,
Oh, a mirror.
Sorry.
A mirror?
Like MIRRO.
Oh, a mirror.
Yeah, sorry, real mirror. Sorry, not an art term, not a
Clash of
special.
accents. A mirror, folks who say
Oh,
mirror
no.
or a mirror.
Sorry,
Got it.
I don't know. Was that my Philly accent?
It was
Do I
my
have
DC
one?
ear.
No.
Yeah, where we drag out everything.
But yeah, a lot of my work has mirror in them, and I use that as, I think of it kind of like the backbone. So I start with that, and I usually cut it into like I don't know, like long strips, you know, somewhat, and I use that to really control the movement of the piece. So I sit there and I nip all that stuff, and then
Is the movement wild? You said you have to control it. Like, what's happening?
I'm just controlling my own brain, my own creativity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what is going through your head at this moment as you're breaking and as you're separating? Like, take us into your thought process.
Yeah. A question I often get asked is, do I sketch the work? And I don't. I actually just kind of think of an idea, like an initial thought. Like for this piece over there, the big 36 by 36 piece, I actually thought about me and my sister's relationship. And I was thinking, like, what would be a symbol that maybe would represent that, you know? And then I want to make that in the mirror. So that symbol ended up being a moon and a sun. And I just kind of drew out different designs for that. And it's just like one curve would be the sun, you know, going external. And then the other one would be the moon. And so that's as far as the sketches go. And sometimes I don't even do that. I just immediately start gluing onto the board. And then I build out from there.
The gluing and the breaking and the adding is very intricate work, and you have to pay a lot of attention to detail. So are you a patient person as this is happening?
I don't think of myself as patient at all, actually. But I
Hurry up and get on there.
I mean, I have to slow myself down. I do,
Okay.
and I feel like it's very meditative, the process. Like it's very, like in the beginning, I'm paying a lot of attention, really focusing on the mirror, and then once I have that backbone, that like first initial, I don't know, the beginning of it.
Like an outline, maybe.
An outline, yes.
Okay.
That's a perfect way to describe it. And once I have that outline, I then can just focus on color, shape, form, and I'm not really thinking with my, like, I don't know, analytical brain, what would it, my right side or whatever. I'm really thinking about just like what it looks like. And that is a lot more meditative in the flow, one would say.
So that's how those thoughts and ideas end up on the wood. Is it wood?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, everything's on wood panel. And there's actually a story behind that. if you
Oh,
wanna
let's hear the
it.
story. Yes, I'm all for the story. What's the story?
So when I decided to move away from the small 6x6 inch pieces, I was like, I want to work bigger, you know? So I went out and bought plywood, a big piece of plywood. I don't know, it was probably like 4 feet by 2 feet or something.
So you strolled into Home Depot to do this? Oh, okay.
I
Great.
go to
Yeah.
Home Depot a lot.
Really? Okay.
Most of my supplies, you know, other than the glass, are
Okay.
from Home Depot.
Pull up.
I got a Home
ahead.
Depot credit card. It's
What?
a little embarrassing.
I hope they give you that's not embarrassing at all. They need to sponsor you.
But I basically got the wood, and I was just sitting there looking at the wood, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what design, and I noticed that the wood grain was actually really beautiful. And I decided that I would trace the wood grain as best I could with mirror. And that piece, I remember I think that's really when I was just like, wow, I made this, you know, it felt otherworldly because I think I was just really in the flow. And a lot of my swirls and movement actually kind of originated from that wood grain look.
We see in your work, if we can transition to talk about this exhibit that we're enjoying today, a family portrait. So much that we can talk about with that. No, it's not uh-oh at all. It's uh-oh wonderful that you have presented a work that is both personal, because next to each piece, we see pictures of your family that came. It looks like, if I were to imagine my grandmother's house, I'd be walking through and like picking the photographs off of the mantle, and this one and that one because they're framed. And so it looks like they're very, very close to your family, to your heart, to your home there. But it's also really universal because many people have sisters, brothers. We all have parents, and we have complicated relationships with parents. So let's kind of walk through how this came together for you, starting with who's in your family that you decided to bring into this exhibit.
So a lot of this started with my grandfather, and it started with hearing his stories. My sister, a lot more extroverted than me, she's the person who asked the good questions. She said, can you tell us about your life and your stories? And I want to record them for the future. So we're sitting there listening to his stories about being a taxi cab driver, you know, when he was in college, and when he met Martin Luther King Jr. and kind of got like, started working with him. And I just decided like this would make like a really great art show, just to like emphasize his life. And then I think as I really started to think about my family history, I noticed that I think on my mom's side and my dad's side, I could kind of use them as foils. Like I felt like they had interesting stories that I feel like complemented each other. My grandmother is the other main character I feel like in the show on my mom's side, and her life being in an interracial relationship and having mixed kids and having her husband actually pass away early on when my mom was 10 from sickle cell anemia. So I felt like it could initiate a lot of great conversation about race and health and just the past.
It absolutely does. So to start off, you mentioned your grandfather. You were speaking about Robert Green.
Yes, his name is Robert L. Green.
Yeah, and there's a doctor in there too, right?
He is a doctor.
Dr. Robert L. Green.
He's
Yeah,
a very
tell us about it.
well-educated man. He got his doctorate in psychology, which is very interesting. And because my mom has also got her doctorate in psychology. So I have a lot of education-focused people. And he was actually driving as a taxi cab driver, listening to Martin Luther King Jr. on the radio, and that he saw that he was going to have like a convention. So he decided to go to this convention and introduce himself because he was just very in awe of what he was doing. I mean, this was, earlier on in Martin Luther King Jr. His journey as a preacher and motivating people, getting them together. So he said, I'd like to work for you. When I get out of school, when I get my doctorate, I'd love to work for you. And MLK was like, yeah, come back to me when you're done and I will hire you. And he did as head of his education efforts. So he really focused on making sure, young Black youth got through and got their education and focused. And yeah, it really got him started working with protests and marches and
he shows up in the piece that is, folks online can't see this, but to the back right, the green piece.
Yes, that piece is the second edition of the March Against Fear piece. And that's inspired by his work in that march. I can go through it. Basically, the March Against Fear was initiated by James Meredith. He was a young college student who was really upset with how Blacks were being intimidated at the polls. They had just gotten the right to vote, but they couldn't vote, you know what I mean? Because there's people outside holding guns. And so he decided he was going to march through different states, and he was going to protest that. But then on day 2, he actually got shot. He got shot by someone who was very angry, obviously, at Black people wanting to do this. And MLK decided to step in, take over the march, bring a lot more people into the fold. And my grandfather was able to help lead those efforts.
Someone else who plays a really prominent role in your work is your sister, Kayla.
Yes.
So, and she's your younger sister, right?
Yes, she is 3 years younger.
I know about having a sister who's 3 years younger, 3 years and 8 months younger.
All right.
You also described glass as fickle, so fickle in nature. So I want to try to pull those two ideas together, having a sister and then also knowing or believing that glass is fickle. Are relationships between sisters sometimes fickle? And do we see that come out in the work that you did, dedicated to your sister or inspired by your sister?
Definitely. I think I was doing a lot of thinking about what it is to have a sister, what it is to have just a sibling in general, and the fact that you are automatically connected. Whether or not you like each other, you get along, you're a unit. And I feel like we've gone through periods where we're together, we're in sync, we're playing Barbie dolls together, we're both talking about college stories together. And then we have periods where, I have my first job and she's still in college, and, we just start diverging, and then we kind of come back together. And I think that very much that flow is the sibling relationship, and definitely as kids of divorced parents, I feel like we had to stick it together. We're a unit. We're a team.
You're processing that together. In some of our pre-show earlier last week, we talked about that. 'Cause I'm also, my family story includes divorce and remarriage, and also a brother with whom we were sticking it out together. So when you say that, that energy really resonates with me, and I'm sure it also resonates with other people. There's a work in particular that I really loved, and I'm sure other folks will love too, Sisters and the Moon. So can you talk a little bit about the composition of that piece and why you call it Sisters in the Moon?
Yeah, so the reason why I came up with that symbol, that kind of like two crescents, is because I was just thinking about who we are and like our differences. And I started thinking about astrology. I mean, I got really into it, and she's
Okay.
actually a Leo, so that
Okay.
makes her planet the sun. I know it's a little confusing because it's not a planet, but you know, her planet is the sun and mine is the moon. And so I felt like those two, obviously, I think in a lot of stories, they have a relationship, the moon and the sun, you know. And I thought that really, if you were to ever meet my sister, she embodies that kind of warmth, that growth, that expansion, that extrovert, ness. And I'm kind of more the opposite in a way. So that was why I created this. And there's actually two pieces of wood that I'm actually using as kind of showing that diversion, the actual like separateness of us, and the fact that we are two different people,
In one unit, though, like in one work of art. If we can get really deep about it, like your parents' work of art are their two children. So
Right.
you're kind of presenting that relationship.
We have like one unit or one singular root, that we just separated, almost like a family tree, to kind of bring that symbolism home.
Yeah. So shout out to Kayla for being a great sister. Thank you so much
She's
for
a great
that.
sister.
Your other grandfather, George Sutherland, right? Yes, got that
Yes.
right. In a way, you offer a tribute to him. So let's just start with understanding, who was he to you? What did you love about him? Bring him kind of into this space for us.
Yeah, so a lot of what I know about him is actually just through my mom. He passed away when my mom was 10 years old. So I never got to meet him, but there's stories about his creativity, and he worked in journalism and education. And I think it's just amazing that he was able to have this life because he knew he had sickle cell anemia at a very early age. And so he knew his time was limited because at that time, if you had sickle cell anemia, you were going to have a short life, unfortunately. The medicine has really progressed since then. But he met my grandmother my grandma was a nurse. So he actually met her getting blood transfusions. And even though he was black and she was white and her family was a lot more prejudiced, they decided to get married. They decided to just push past it, and they had three children. My mom is the oldest.
The title of that piece is The Beauty of a Crescent Moon. Can you talk a little bit about the similarity between the crescent shape and the shape of the sickle cell, and why in all of that it was actually beautiful?
Yeah, I thought a long time about that title, and I decided that because I felt like his life was beautiful even though it wasn't long, it wasn't a whole, it was short but also beautiful because he really took that time to do everything that he wanted to do. And a little bit of background about sickle cell anemia. I don't know how many people know about it, but it's when your white blood cells are sickle shaped. So you're not getting as much oxygen, throughout your body. And it's actually beneficial, in Africa because it would help, if you got malaria, it would help fight against that. So it's just interesting that this thing that is kind of a biological
Defense?
defense, is actually like a bad thing. But I also feel like that's a very common thing that a lot of Black people deal with in this country. I fortunately don't have the trait, but the trait can live on in a lot of people.
The idea of the crescent moon really captured my attention as well, and that shape of a crescent. Do you want to talk a little bit about why the shape of the crescent really captivated you?
Right. I think I was thinking about the flow also that I use in my pieces a lot. And I was thinking about actually, inside the body and the blood and the fact that it's rushing and flowing. And so I think that it just felt like the perfect symbol for that piece to just show that crescent moon. And I think that it just, I think the moon is beautiful, and it comes up in my sister piece as well, to just kind of show that, you know, it lives on in us, right? His beauty, his crescent, you know, moon of life goes on in us.
If you Google it, which I had to do a little bit of, the Googles
Oh.
tell us that the crescent shape is related to new phases in life, to new chapters and a new beginning. So
Right.
it sounds like your grandfather took this sickle cell, which was a challenge, but also decided to have a new meaning and a new beginning. And we can
Right.
kind of get that inspiration when we look at it. It's a very deep, rich, multi-layered red as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually went to the glass store and was like, okay, I need glass that looks like blood. I'm a little scared, but you know, I was like really looking for different layers. And I feel like that piece I actually made very quickly. And I think I was really in the flow with that piece. And I really think that me making that piece was a tribute to him, you know, just even the process and being in the flow, you know, almost like he's looking over my shoulder.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a beautiful conversation that you're having with him, even though you all had not met in this space.
Right.
You know, the physical space. You met him in a different one. The other thing that stands out to me about that piece and about many of your pieces is your use of gold.
Oh.
We can see that throughout. Why gold? How does it interact with you when you look at it? And what do you want it to say to the viewer when we look at it?
I was thinking about whether to use gold or silver, and I use silver or just regular mirror a lot. But the reason I went with gold was because growing up, I feel like gold was really present in my grandma's house on my dad's side, and they just had a lot of gold things, and she would wear a lot of gold jewelry, and I think it just was a very rich, kind of like the way they just decorated their home, and I think it's just etched in my memories, you know, just that gold, and it makes me think of family visits, going to grandma's house. And so it's really just a personal touch, you know, for me. When I was thinking about their colors, I was like, well, I got to use gold and green. You know?
Of course. Because
course.
it's grandma's color.
You know,
gotta
it's
bring
grandma's
them,
color.
Yeah, yeah. And some other colors are that brownish color. How would you describe that? 'Cause
Right.
Is it brown?
I think of like amber, brown.
Amber. Yes, amber.
Yeah, and I use that a lot. I think I was thinking about skin tones and race, and I found some glass that really represented that. And so that's why I kind of chose these like different shades of brown, different, because there's biracial, my mom, and then there's me and my sister, and then there's, you know, my dad's side, which is it's all black.
Yes, it's all
So-
black. Yeah, yeah. So when we look at your work, we can see a diversity of skin tone, which I think is common in most people's family. It's definitely common in my family and friends' family that you have people who span the spectrum, which is
Right.
what we say is a really beautiful thing about the Black identity, is seeing that throughout. I have just a few more questions, and then if we have any questions from folks who are here, we will take those. So let's go back to your initial statement of I break things and I put them back together. So we talked about what that meant literally, the smashing, the nipping. Can we bring that to this exhibit? Is there anything that you broke and put back together in creating this work?
Right. I think that when I was younger, I never really wanted to learn about my history. Like I wasn't really interested in it. So I think that when I started really like listening to their stories and learning that like my grandma on my mom's side, like they wrote letters back and forth, and my mom like read a little section of one. And I think just learning about those stories, I started to kind of put together the fact that maybe I didn't want to learn about the past because of the fact that I think for, you know, Black people, there's just a lot of like bad feelings when you think about the past. But hearing those beautiful stories and the triumphs and just like overcoming all of these challenges made me, I think, just starting putting together my past. And so for me, this whole show is a way to put together missing pieces of the family portrait, you know, and trying to reconnect that line to my ancestors and people who came before me.
That's beautiful to think about during this month in particular, during Black History Month. So you're able to tell your own story, and Black women don't always have the right. I'm not going to call it a luxury because it is a right to tell our own stories and be in control of that narrative. Was that something you thought about as you were putting this work together? That you are empowered to create your own story, taking your family's story, the facts, and then also your own interpretation of it?
Definitely. I think that I grew up in a family where there wasn't a lot of conversation about the past. You kind of had to ask, you had to initiate that conversation. And so I think that it's a little scary, the fact that I think me and my sister, I probably would have just gone my whole life to not asking anything. And so I think that her initiating that conversation kind of made me bolder to have tough conversations and to hear things that maybe, I think because I'm a woman, maybe my grandfather feels like he can't share or be 100% honest or really indulge us. But I think that, I don't know, I think that it just emboldened me as a woman to really ask those tough questions and hear about those tough moments.
That's tremendous growth. I feel like we need to have Kayla in the room
I wish
for a
she was
conversation
here.
at some point about art, because she also has her own form of expression, right? You said that she's an artist.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have the one piece called the double-sided coin because I feel like we are very similar, but we express ourselves kind of in opposite ways. Growing up, we were both very creative, but she did dance, more performance, and I was always, tinkering around with paint and different things like that. And she's into fashion now, which is funny because when I was younger, I was very into fashion. So it's like we flipped in that way. So yeah, I would love to have her here if she was here.
Hopefully that'll happen. What's next? I understand you're working on another set of work for an exhibit at Strathmore.
Right. I'm working on a lot of white pieces right now. And I think creatively, it's a great way for me to focus more on texture and light and kind of not get too into the weeds with different colors and variations. But I also think that this show is an opportunity for me to expand on kind of a different area that I didn't show in this exhibit, but I made some black and white pieces that just kind of, again, was talking about race and growing up as a Black kid in a very white environment. So I'm excited to kind of expand on those ideas.
And what's going to be your soundtrack for that? More house? A bit.
It might be. You're going to have to come and find out.
And so you're based here in the DC area, and your studio is here too?
Yes, I'm at 52 O Street.
Oh, fantastic. Right downtown.
Yeah, it's a great place. Hopefully, when the pandemic loosens up, we can have another open house.
That would be fantastic. Did you have fun during this conversation?
Yes, I learned some things about myself. You were able to...
It's great. Up top, girl. We did that. We had a little side chat, and Dany said that she expresses herself with her work, not necessarily with her words. But you did a wonderful job of expressing yourself through your words. So thank you for that. Any questions from folks or from the internets? No? Yes.
Oh, it's a lot easier than painting because as soon as I glue down the last piece, it's kind of done and there's no going back. I can't really pry them off. So sometimes I have to stop myself from adding little pieces in the cracks. But yeah, I think once it's all laid down, it's a very decisive medium. Oh. Oh, I don't think it is complete, actually. I plan on just keeping this growing. As I learn more things about my family, I want to make new pieces, and I see this as kind of an ongoing process.
As we conclude, thank you so much. Oh, we have another question? Yes. And I'm going to repeat back the question, too, just so we can get it in the mic.
Oh, great.
Do you have a love-hate relationship with any of your work? You look at I can't stand this. Particularly the ones that have more emotional things behind it.
So the question was, do you have a love-hate relationship with your work, particularly the pieces that evoke a particular emotion?
Yeah, definitely. I try to be very objective once I'm finished it and just say, it's finished. And I try to say to myself that I'll let other people decide. I don't want to so I don't mention whether I like a piece or don't like a piece, because I feel like once I have it's a different piece of me. It's not like me anymore. And so I let other people have a relationship with it. And so sometimes I do look at a piece and I feel disappointed because it didn't turn out how I wanted, or I actually made that black and white piece where it's actually black on the outer and white on the inside, like a circle. I hung it up and it kind of creeped me out. That piece is actually called Oreo, which if you're black, you may know that is not a very nice thing to be called. It kind of says that you act like a white person even though you're black on the outside. And I think when I hung it up, it creeped me out partially because it did make me think of those memories of being a kid and not feeling like you're fitting in. And it made me think of my mom's stories of feeling like she had trouble fitting in either group, being a biracial person. And yeah, I honestly had to take the piece down.
Really?
Because I was just like, it started making, I don't think it was just the meaning. I think just the look of it. I don't know.
That was a great question. Thank you. I had no
I can't
idea we were
explain
going to
it.
bring all of that out. So if we take it to another level, something that you created yourself, so you creeped yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that once the piece is done, again, it feels like it's not me anymore, right? As I'm working, it's an extension of me, but once it's done, it's kind of like, I don't know. I know a lot of artists call it their children. And that's frowned upon. But yeah, it's like, it is me, but it's also not me, right?
Because it's your creation, but maybe your creativity kind of took over in
Yeah.
a subconscious kind of way.
And I think you finally kind of like step back, like you're looking at it, as opposed to being in the weeds. You kind of take a step back and then you look at it and you're like, oh,
That's what
maybe
I
I
did.
communicated some things and
know I
maybe
had.
there's feelings of anger and disappointment in that piece specifically.
Oh, so where is it now?
It's sold, which is exciting.
Wait.
Yeah, it's gone.
So this piece,
Which
that
I'm
was
okay with.
this piece that was born out of, let's call it like disappointment, frustration, hurt,
Right.
that you actually had to get rid of.
Yeah.
It's Trasher.
Yeah, I think
Got
it was time. It was
The
time for
treasure
it to
in the
go.
trash. Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think it's easy for me to like sell work and get rid of it because again, like I try to like separate myself. Like I made it and now it is out in the world living its own life.
How do you feel about that notion of sometimes an artist's pain actually helping them to earn a living, like in this
Right.
case?
It is weird. I mean, sometimes I think of myself as a sponge and the fact that I absorb feelings and I try to process them and then I'm putting them back out. I don't agree with the notion that artists need to be sad or hurting to make work. I actually think I make my best work when I'm happy and feeling safe. But I think it is weird that like you have to be this like processing unit,
Yeah.
It's hard, but I think certain personalities just fit with that. You're already doing it, so.
We didn't talk about the other inspiration, like contemporary inspiration
Oh.
for your work from any medium, whether it's film or music or other artists or people you're reading that's informing how you're thinking about your future work.
Right. I actually don't look at a lot of mosaics, which I think is interesting. I look at a lot of paintings. I try to keep that, cycle going. Like I keep myself consuming more and more content because it really gets my brain, excited. And I think a lot of my inspiration comes from I read a lot of books and I,
Yes.
listen to audiobooks and stuff.
Shout out to the book lovers. People,
So-
my people.
You're visualizing it, right? As you're reading, you're thinking like, what does that look like? So I think some of it comes from there. And I also get a lot of my inspiration from the literal materials, Sometimes I get a material and I'm like, I got to use it. I gotta use that
How do you know
piece.
when you look at glass and you're like, I have to use this? What does the
Ooh, I
glass
just
tell
love
you?
it.
Yeah, what does it tell you though when you're looking at
It
it?
tells me it's beautiful. And I agree.
Use me, baby.
I mean,
You said,
sometimes
"Yes, I will."
someone gives me like, their broken teapot and I break it. And then I'm like, okay, I need to like take it from there.
Wait.
Oh.
So someone gives you their teapot. They know you're going to break it though.
I mean, they usually give it to me with it's like has a chip or like you know part of it broke off. So
I'll just finish
I'm
the
the
job.
trash can, I guess.
This was broken anyway. You're going in the bag.
I have to tell people only the beautiful stuff. You know, don't just bring me just any broken thing. You
Bring
know,
me your beautiful stuff so I can break it.
right. You know, because the line between you know artist and hoarder is thin, so you have to be careful. not collecting too much stuff. You know.
Okay, Dany Green.
I'm
Now we know
done
what's
spilling my
happening.
secrets. Sorry.
Yes, please keep it coming. Now we know what's happening in your house is we're giving you something like,
No.
oh, it just has a chip. You're like, ha, 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 until.
I know. I mean, for me, I think I forget the fact that breaking things is scary to people and it's a bad thing. But for me, it's like, yay.
It's part of your process. It's the initiation of the process. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to repeat it so that we can make sure we get it. AV guy.
I appreciate that so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
You feel like you've talked so much about all the different significance of how you put things together, like composition and sourcing and inspiration and concept or whatever. But is there significance for you in the breaking part of it? The fact that breaking is like an essential part of your workflow and how you make your pieces. Like, what is the?
Oh, yeah.
What is that the destroying of the old thing to make the new thing mean?
I definitely think so. I mean, I don't really find that part therapeutic. Some people ask me that, but I do think like breaking it down in that meditative process and just like nipping, like, I don't know, there is something there that I maybe need to explore more, but it's very meditative to me. And I think it's like that line between kind of what you said, the intentionality and the randomness. So I think accepting that kind of things break randomly, but then also introducing my hand to the situation, introducing my control, and finding that balance when I break things between control and random happenings that happen when I break things.
We didn't talk about the most obvious thing that we've all experienced in the past 2 years was the pandemic and being quarantined. Some artists found that that period of isolation to be healing and thoughtful. Others found it incredibly challenging because we were isolated, not to mention all of the financial impact to creatives who weren't able to put their work out there. How did you experience it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel really fortunate that I actually had my day job at that point. So, and I didn't lose it, you know, so I feel really lucky in the fact that I did have that income stream. And I think that at first I was kind of paralyzed, right? You're just reading the news, doom scrolling, you know, on social media. But then I just started to create more, you know, I allowed myself to create, and I actually moved out of my studio at that point and moved everything into my apartment, which was nice, I think, for me, because I was able to just like get out of bed, make a little bit of art, you know, and then like do work and then do a little bit of art. And it became a very, I don't know, like a nice way to process what's going on and kind of like distract myself also from what's going on. And then I was able to move back into the studio afterwards. And I feel like, even though I never want to be thankful for the pandemic, I am not. But it did enable me to really push my art further. I mean, where it was in the beginning versus now is very different.
If you were to go back to your younger self or the self that was unsure about this pivot, what would you say to her?
I think younger me would be really excited. I think they'd be like, no way. We're artists. I'd be like, yeah. And I think it'd be cool. I mean, I would just tell her to not be afraid to invest in it. You know, don't be afraid to spend some money in it. It's not a waste, even if it doesn't turn out looking nice. Because every time you invest in it, you spend that time or that money, you're not just investing in that object, you're investing in yourself, you know, to be
And
kind of
somebody
corny.
else might want to buy it.
Right.
On Instagram for more than $70.
No, man, you know, pricing's always a scary thing to talk about, you know.
Well, you can get other people to do it.
Right, exactly.
Yes, you can get your people to talk about it and just drop that price and let people know it is what it is.
It is what it is.
You can say it's
up-
above me now.
Right, and yeah, sorry, that's That's a different pay grade.
That is a different pay grade, but to be honest, artists also have to make a living.
Right.
So I feel no types of way about dropping a price on somebody else's work.
Right.
Just saying, if people need me to showcase their work.
No.
Okay, so that was, I gave you the first close. This was our second close.
Nice.
So we're going to thank you again, and to all the folks who asked those really great questions and pushed our conversation even further. We will close out what's on Instagram, and we here in person get to look at your work with a closer eye, having heard all of the background and the processing. So thank you again for your time. Congratulations on your
Thank
show.
you.
It's no small feat to have, a solo exhibition.
Yeah.
And wish you the best of luck, and we'll see you at the Strathmore and other places around.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It was a delight.